Welcome back to Epic Exchanges. Here we are already in the middle of February, and I am very excited to have my friend of a couple of years now, maybe even longer, maybe 4 years even,
Uh,
Emily Kady with me to share her story. Welcome, Emily.
oh, thank you so much, Kelly, for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I can't wait to hear your story. I've heard bits of it, but I haven't heard the whole thing. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
I have always been a highly sensitive person and empath. And growing up, I had my own challenges, learning disabilities and whatnot. And trying to being a highly sensitive person, you tend to be an overachiever. You want everything to be perfect. You want to fit in. And by doing that, I found myself in my adult life very successful, yet burnt out, exhausted, completely drained, and had nothing left to give, which led me to a near death experience that completely transformed who I am from an overachiever to somebody that just has fully accepted who I am as an empath.
Wow, that's quite the introduction. Now I can't wait to hear your story. So why don't you dive in and talk about this near-death experience?
Absolutely. So, again, I was a high overachiever, and I was in my mid 30s at the time. I had two very successful businesses that I owned. They were both seven-figure businesses. I was married to a man that was in and out of the hospital. I was constantly taking care of him. And I was drained. I had nothing to give. At the time, I realized I was living my life for everyone else but myself. I was taking care of a sick man. I was running a business, trying to show off my worth, which they didn't align with who I was at all. But that's what I thought I was supposed to be doing. That's like a societal norm. um, and being just burnt out, exhausted, having nothing to give, I ended up finding myself in a doctor's office for minor treatment, but I had a adverse reaction to an injection my doctor had given me. I think my whole nervous system was just out of whack because of just pushing myself so hard that I ended up having a grand mal seizure. um, when I had the seizure, what was happening for me was prior to the seizure, this room started to spin uncontrollably. I was, if you've ever fainted, it was those feelings times 100. It was so awful. And I just remember trying to say to my doctor, I need help. But nothing would come out of my mouth. I couldn't speak. Then out of nowhere, I was transported from this really uneasy, uncomfortable feeling to euphoria, like in a snap of a finger. I was in this black tunnel with a white light at the end and a black silhouette in front of the white light, and I was just floating. I was, um, I would say the word would be expansive. There was just no limits, there was no boundaries. I was whole for the first time in my life. I felt amazing. It was, yeah, I just see this complete euphoric feeling. And as I'm floating up, I didn't really understand where I was or who I was or who the silhouette was, but I knew that I was being drawn to the silhouette of this being in front of me. I didn't care. I didn't like, you know how here on earth we care. We care about if we're in a dark tunnel, we're going to somebody we don't know who it is. We care. We want to be cautious about our next steps. And in this moment of my life, I didn't care. I was at peace. Um, then I realized, oh, I'm transitioning. And right then I had this poignant thought. My mom, my dad, and my beloved dog Buster are going to grieve my loss. This news is going to devastate them. And it's Kelly, it was the weirdest thing because I was like worried about them, but I wasn't going to grieve. I wasn't going to have any grief. I knew that. I didn't have that pain in my heart. I just knew that they were going to.
Mm.
So it was such a fascinating experience for me because being an empath, being a highly sensitive person, you care about everyone's feelings because you feel them. I wasn't worried about feeling them. I just knew that they were going to feel them. And it was really actually an empowering um, experience for me because then I realized I didn't have to feel everyone's feelings and take them on as my own in that moment. I could care about what was going to happen to them, but I didn't have to worry about or feel their pain. So as I've realized that at the same time, I was shown these three timelines and they look like the thermometers that had the liquid mercury in them, this old school there was like three of them and they were stacked. And so the liquid mercury was showing me how long each of their grief period, their devastating grief period would be. And so I could see that it wasn't going to be for the rest of their life. I saw that there was like an end to that devastation, that they could have a smile on their face again. They could enjoy their life. So I was like, awesome, they're going to be good. They're just going to have some trying time for a few years. And as I continued to float up and was excited to transition, all of a sudden, this force out of nowhere pushed me back into my physical body. What was happening, my doctor was resuscitating me because I stopped breathing. And so she had to she had to perform CPR on me. And so I came back into my body, and this was an awful experience coming back into my body because I had amnesia. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who my doctor was. She was a stranger that scared me. Like the being on the other side did not scare me. A doctor yelling Emily, and I didn't know who Emily was or who she was, and yelling my name. I was filled with fear instantly. Um, the white, stark exam room was very uncomfortable. It was confining. It was like just really unsettling for me. Whereas in the spiritual realm, it was expansive. There was nothing to confine me. And now I'm confined into this room. I didn't understand what walls were. It was this weird experience of coming back into my body. So it took me a few minutes to kind of orient myself, remember who I was. I still didn't know who my doctor was. It took me a while to figure out who she was. And when I finally got back into my body, or back into who I was like, it again, it just took me a while, but I never felt myself again. Never felt like my old self, the overachiever, the person that had to perform and show off her worth by having nice things or expensive, house and cars. And I didn't need that anymore. None of that mattered to me. Um, and within 6 months after my near-death experience, I was able to have the courage to leave my husband. I needed to leave him. It was a very dysfunctional marriage. It was not an easy one because I knew he was ill. Um, and I did care for him, but I had to, for my own sanity. Um, and within probably a year, maybe a year and a half after that, I was able to close my businesses because they were taking me down a path that wasn't me. And I knew I needed to figure out why I'm here. I needed to stop living for everyone else and start living for myself. So that's what I started to do. I retreated. I found a cute little house that was near the beach in Southern California, and I would walk to the beach with my dog every day. We'd walk into town to coffee shops, and I'd work in coffee shops. And at the time, my spiritual gifts really awoken, and I started to hear and see angels, which I had done as a little kid, but I didn't. I kind of, because of being an overachiever and so focused on work and performing for everyone else, I pushed my spiritual side aside. I just didn't want to connect with it, and so here I stepped back into my spiritual side because it was so strong. I had experienced it and I could access it really easily. The spirits were there, and I was relying on them very heavily in that I needed to understand why I was here, because Kelly, I didn't want to be back. After experiencing that euphoria, I was like, I want to go back there, but I knew I couldn't. If I took my own life, I knew I'd have to come back and relive this life again. I would have to relive the hardship of what I had already been through. I knew I was going to have to, and I didn't want to do that. And I also knew from going to the other side that there was a purpose here for me. There's a purpose for every single one of us here. And I knew I needed to live out this purpose. So that's what I just started day by day, week by week, month by month. I started to do some deep soul searching, living in my little tiny home by the beach, being the little hermit that I became, just so I could really identify who I was and why I was here. And I allow my spiritual gifts to develop. I worked with a one-on-one with a mentor, a spiritual mentor, to really help me develop my gifts. And reprogram my brain. I had to seriously reprogram every bit of the way I thought to accept who I am and how do you function as this different person that's never functioned this way on this earth. And it's outside of the societal norms. So I worked slowly at it, and I started to work with other spiritual gurus behind the scenes. I would write for them, I would support them, just so I could develop my own gifts and my own skill set. And eventually I was kind of kicked by my spirit team and said, it's time for you to get out of hiding and step out and really start to walk out your destiny of being a beacon of light to help other people that need to understand their purpose here on earth and why they came here. This is a pivotal moment that we are all in right now of this great transition. It's a 30-year transition that we're going through. And a lot of people, you'll hear people talk about the new earth or 3D going to 5D. What's happening is there's over 1 billion people in the next 10 years that are going to spiritually awaken. This spiritual, right now, there's only 2% of the people spiritually awoken right now. So we're talking about, I want to say it's like 12% is what it's going to turn into with 1 billion people. And as that happens, so we have 10% to go, but as that happens, there's going to be more darkness, dark energy of the old structure that's going to try to hold on to the old ways of what's going on and keep people, well, what's the word? Confined, keep people programmed how they've had us programmed and not allowing us to be who we truly are. So I don't know if that necessarily makes sense, that aspect, but that's basically what's going on. And that's why my job here is, my purpose is to help people awaken, help get them out of the old programs that are holding them hostage essentially, and really help them step into their true identity and their true purpose.
Wow, that's a huge change from, I wrote some notes, from being an overachiever and always doing what you were supposed to be doing. And I want to come back to that phrase in a minute, but to actually doing what you truly know you're supposed to be doing, not what the world's told you. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know there's probably a lot of people listening that are just like, wait a second, did she say near-death experience? Did she say this? Like, where are we? But we're all about sharing stories to expand our minds, expand our lives. So thank you for sharing yours.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that supposed to be doing, the I like to call it the hamster wheel that our society, particularly Western society, is on. And you mentioned some things throughout your story about like the nice cars, the nice houses, the things we're supposed to be collecting, buying, the achievements we're supposed to be collecting. Was that something that you got from your growing up, from the schools you were in, or was it just like just the progress of life in terms of who you were working for and all those expectations? Like, how do you think that message got into you?
I know exactly how. So I had a learning disability as a kid, and I'm from a very highly educated family. I'm the only one with a bachelor's degree. Everyone's very highly educated. And my parents didn't, their only goal for me was to get me through high school. Like, they didn't think I could even go on to college. I couldn't read or write. It was very challenging. And I just wanted to fit in and feel normal. That's it. I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't. So that's where I became the overachiever. I self-taught. Of course, I had teachers, and I was in special ed, and I had teachers that definitely helped me out. But I was so determined to fit in that I became, I gave up my childhood essentially so I could learn. I could read, I could write, I could be normal. But then what came along with that is I have to show off that I am equal to people. I have to show off that I am worthy. I have to show off that I am successful. I have to buy things that I don't need, but I want because I want people to think I'm good. I think that I'm worthy. I'm equal. It was just a really deep rooted wound for me.
It's almost like putting on a mask. You're putting on the
Oh,
costume.
100%. Yes, it was a facade at a very, very young age.
Well, and I mean, similar to my story in terms of the always taking care of other people and being there for other people and everything, and it really driving you to a point of unwellness. Even when you're not, you don't even know how unwell you are. So there you are in the doctor's office and tests and whatnot, and they decide to give you a shot for whatever it was they determined you needed. And your body goes, yeah, no.
Yeah.
And so I find it interesting when you were saying like I went through a period of several years where I passed out, fainted quite a lot. And so I know when it's coming on, when I'm like, oh, the faint is coming, I need to lay down or
With
something.
my
And
head between my legs. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I know exactly that
Um,
feeling. Mhm.
and so I totally recognize those signs now, even now, 20, several years later, since the last time it really happened. But so you kind of knew that something was going on. As you said, the room was spinning, but it was worse than fainting and everything. But then you knew exactly what was going on in terms of like seeing the dark tunnel and the light at the end and and you even said to yourself, "Oh, I'm transitioning."
Yeah, I didn't know immediately. So time up there is like speed of light. So my body, in the physical, when I was probably, dying or whatever, when it's transitioning was probably just a few minutes.
Mhm.
There, it felt like I was there. I couldn't even tell you. I would say it felt like I was there for weeks, months. It was a long time. So in the first bit of it, I couldn't tell you where I was at. I was just in this euphoric state and it felt amazing. It took me a minute, but once I figured out, oh, I'm transitioning, it was like, okay, yeah, I knew. But I didn't know I didn't have the outer body experience where I could see what was going on with my body. I just know because my doctor had told me afterwards what had happened and she had to resuscitate me. I didn't see my body having a seizure or anything of that sort.
Okay, so other people's near-death experiences, it's like I've heard they're floating in the room and they're seeing them
Yeah,
being
I
done.
didn't have that. Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Hey, so interesting. I love how everybody's experience is a little bit different and that there's no two that are exactly the same.
No,
Um,
it's just like our lives. There's no two that are exactly the same, we're all so unique.
let's talk for a second about being an empath, because I am. And you
Mhm.
talked
I mean,
about highly sensitive, but also the feeling others' pain. But then you said that in this experience, you realized that you didn't have to feel others' pain. When you were back in your physical body and here on earth, did you carry that still with you? Like, did you have that boundary in place in terms of like, oh, I don't have to feel other people's pain, so this is better?
I am aware of it. So my experience in that transition was I was whole. I was whole. Every part of me was together. And so that was an innate thing for me to not have to feel other people's feelings. However, here, we're here for a human experience, Kelly. I chose to be an empath. You chose to be an empath. But what it made me aware of is one, this is an amazing spiritual gift to work with if you know how to work with it. Knowing how to set boundaries of not feeling other people's emotions or recognizing this is not my emotion and I don't have to hold it.
Mm.
So I came out in a much stronger position of understanding, okay, this is not mine. This is an amazing gift. I use it in my practice daily. I'm always like, if I'm working with a client, I allow my empathic gifts to come through so I can understand what's going on with my clients. Um, but yes, I don't have that same, like those embarrassing, uncontrollable cries. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm.
Because all of a sudden you have this sadness overwhelm you. I don't necessarily have that. The other day I was at a restaurant with my mom and my dad and my sister, and there were two ladies across from us, and they were crying. And I could feel their grief. It was a really and heavy, heavy grief. Like they just lost someone they loved. I could just feel it. And they were 15 feet from me. And I could see myself starting to go into that sadness and start to cry. And I'm like, this is not mine. This is theirs. It's not doing them any good by me taking on this feeling, nor is it doing me any good. So I'm just from a very different position of understanding how to work with this gift and knowing that, yeah, sometimes I do still feel it, but I can put a stop to it. Whereas before, I would have been in tears at breakfast with my mom and dad and sister, and they would have been like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't know. I can't tell you."
Right.
I can't tell you. And they didn't understand. They're like, "Why does she cry all the time? Why is she so emotional?" It's just part of being an empath.
Yeah. It just reminds me that the first children's book that I featured on the podcast was called Emmy the Empath. And it was a book that caught my eye for that very reason, right? Explaining what an empath is
Mhm.
in a simple way, but also how to kind of protect yourself and your emotions. So,
I
um,
love that. I have to read that book. I wish I had that book as a kid. I wish my parents, I know my parents would have wished they had it because it's really hard for parents to understand how to deal with this empathic child.
yeah, definitely. So we do have a video where the author is reading it. So I'll make sure you
I'm
get
gonna definitely watch that. Thank you. You should, could
um,
you put the link to the video down in this description, the YouTube too, or maybe on that?
yes,
That'd be great.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, because some people just don't, I mean, I don't think it's really well known what an empath is for a lot of people.
Yeah, we think that it's about being empathetic, and
Mhm.
it's very different.
It's
So,
very different.
yeah,
Yes.
it took me a long time to figure out what it was. I just always said I had a magnifying glass, and whatever someone was feeling, I was feeling 10 times as much, like in front of me. And I never understood why,
Ah,
or what
I
was going on.
know. Me too. And I can't tell you how many embarrassing moments I've had of crying and going, I can't control these tears. It's awful.
Um, so you talk about at near the end of your story, you were talking about purpose and recognizing that all of a sudden you had this clarity of what you were, who you were before was not you living your purpose. You were almost living the world's purpose, right?
Yes.
Accumulate, buy, spend, do, play the role that you're supposed to play.
Hmm.
And now you have this other insight, this other experience that has put you on the path to your true purpose. How how do people who haven't had a near-death experience or that clarity find their purpose?
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be a near-death experience. It could be a dark night of the soul. You know, you're in the middle of a major transition in your life that you don't necessarily have control over, and you wake up and you're thinking it a little bit different. Something has changed in you. There's different things that happen. And when you have those moments, those are the moments that you can choose to lean into the change, the unknown, the scariness of it, or you can choose to resist. And so, like, for me, when I had that, I could have chose after my experience, I could have chose to stay with my husband and taking care of him, um, kept my businesses going. But what was happening to me is I was dying on the inside. Um, or I took that risk. I decided I'm moving on. I have to move on. And and I had to take care of myself. 100% had to go and just be by the ocean and allow the ocean air and the smell of the ocean to just, that salty air just to like really start to nurture and heal me. But for other people, it's the same thing. Recognizing, okay, I'm in this situation. Things are not feeling right for me anymore. I know I need change and I can choose to be uncomfortable for a temporary amount of time for a huge growth spurt that's going to absolutely transform your life. Or you can stay comfortable being uncomfortable in your situation. Leaning into the unknown is scary, but the outcome and the growth far exceeds staying in that confined space. That is you're never going to grow and you're never going to live out your life purpose. I won't
Yeah.
say never. I don't want to say never because that's not fair, but it may take you a little bit longer to get there. There may be more obstacles and more hardship to get there because those lessons keep repeating until you finally go, okay, it's time.
Right. I know for me, it was years of me just kind of feeling the phrase that just keeps coming to mind that I can't get rid of as you're even talking is there's got to be something more. And it's a lyric in a song, but it's also, I was just like, there's something about that that resonates for me. There has to be more.
Yes.
Can't be it.
Yes. Yes. So when you have that feeling, there has to be more. There's something more out there. There is. And that's your intuition like tapping in and saying, "Yep, there is more. We need to go. We need to figure this out." And now it's time to take that leap of faith. Get a little uncomfortable, but trust. Trust that things are going to line up for you.
Yeah. Why is it important for you to share your story?
That's a great question. I know I've been through a lot in life. I've had a school of hard knocks. Um, and I really feel that people can learn from it. My goal is to inspire people to take that leap, to take the step into the unknown so that they can experience why they came here.
And if people listening today or watching us on YouTube just took one thing from our conversation, what do you hope that is?
Mm, you're worthy.
So important.
Yeah.
If people
Everyone's
want to
worthy.
find out more about you and your journey and maybe even work with you, if they want to find their own purpose or open up to their own spiritual gifts, how do they do that?
Yeah, you can visit my website. It's Emily Kady, Kady.com. Or you can find me on social media, Facebook or Instagram at Emily Kady Spiritual Medium, um, as well as on YouTube. I'm on there as Emily Kady. So
Okay, well, we will share all of those links. They'll be in the comment section and we'll have a graphic come out and in our show notes, all of those things so that people can find you easily. They don't have to like rewind or anything to
okay.
catch those things.
Thank you, Kelly.
One last fun question.
Yes.
If there was a book or a movie made of your story, what would it be called?
Mm. Igniting a fierce desire.
Oh, I like that. It like brings up images of flames and sparks and yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for being here and sharing your story. It was good to finally hear it all.
Oh, thank you, Kelly, for having me. It was an honor and privilege to be on your podcast.
I can't wait for it to come out and for everybody to hear your story.
Thank you.